The light definitely like catches your eye. Like if you're in like a dark room or a party, you see that light.
It didn't taste like smoky or anything. It definitely had like a fruity twist.
It doesn't give you secondhand smoke. I think it's just water vapor.
They are becoming more and more prevalent. People think that they're healthier.
And they look like pens. They're so colorful, you know, advertised with all the flavors and all of that. But I really don't know anything about them.
Nicotine is one of the most addictive substances in the world, and for over 150 years, tobacco cigarettes have been the most popular vehicle for nicotine delivery.
But now there's a new kind of cigarette on the market. It's called the electronic cigarette, or e-cigarette, and it's growing in popularity.
E-cigarettes can also be referred to as hookah pens, e-hookahs, e-cigars, or personal vaping devices. They all use the same technology. Some people believe that e-cigarettes are a safer alternative to traditional cigarette smoking, while others think it's too soon to tell and urge you to use caution.
This program will look at what we know and what we don't know about e-cigarettes. We'll hear from Dr. Jonathan Whiteson, a cardiopulmonary specialist who will weigh in on the medical impact of e-cigarettes. You'll also hear from real teens about their experiences.
So let's get started. What are e-cigarettes?
An e-cigarette is a battery-powered inhaler that is designed to mimic traditional cigarette smoking.
The typical cigarette is tobacco that's wrapped in paper and that burns, combusts, and produces smoke that's inhaled, whereas the electronic cigarette is the liquid nicotine that's being vaporized.
There are two main components to most e-cigarettes, the battery and the cartridge. Like other electrical devices, the battery needs to be charged in order for the e-cigarette to function.
Once charged, the battery attaches to a cartridge containing liquid. When a user takes a drag of an e-cigarette, electricity heats a liquid solution, turning it into vapor for the user to inhale. Most solutions contain nicotine. Some contain nicotine and another flavor like grape, cherry, or tobacco. And a few e-cigarettes are simply flavored liquid without nicotine. Liquid nicotine is a lethal poison. Even small amounts of nicotine can cause vomiting, seizures, or possibly death. A teaspoonful can kill a small child. Especially dangerous are vaping devices that have refillable liquid nicotine cartridges. The liquid nicotine can spill or get into the hands of a child with tragic results.
It's reportedly, by the e-cigarette companies, pure nicotine, but we know from studies on the vapor that there's probably more chemicals in the vapor than just nicotine, including diethylene glycol, which in itself is a carcinogen, as well as some metals like iron and copper that have been identified in vapors of some of the e-cigarettes.
There's no tobacco, no like formaldehyde, none of that like really, really bad stuff.
It's still harmful, but not as harmful, so in effort for the harm to take effect, you're gonna have to do it a lot more.
I don't know. I just assume it has like less nicotine, less tarred tobacco, but I'm not sure.
Many people think that vaping is safer than smoking traditional cigarettes. With fewer chemicals, no tar, no tobacco, and no smoke, there seems to be a compelling case.
There are some people who would put forward the idea that e-cigarettes are safer than traditional cigarettes because you don't get so many of the thousands of chemicals and potential carcinogens in the nicotine vapor that you do in a typical cigarette smoke. However, there's so much we don't know about the vapor from electronic cigarettes. We don't know the long-term effects on the human body of inhaling pure nicotine. We know that the vapor, as well as containing nicotine, contains other chemicals which are potential carcinogens. And so I could never say that an electronic cigarette is safe or safer than anything else.
There are many unknowns concerning the health effects of e-cigarettes. One of those unknowns is whether or not e-cigarettes cause cancer. Some preliminary studies indicated that nicotine-laced vapors promote the development of cancer cells in the same way as tobacco smoke does. Final results will be determined at a later date.
I think one of the big appeals of e-cigarettes is that you don't have to go outside to smoke them.
It doesn't give you secondhand smoke. It doesn't give you anything like that.
It definitely doesn't smell like cigarette smoke. It just looks like smoke.
It's water vapor, so it just goes away.
There is a vapor that is exhaled by somebody who has inhaled the nicotine vapor, and this is what we would call the secondhand exposure. There's good evidence to suggest that non-smokers, if they have been around someone who has been using an e-cigarette, they have detectable levels of nicotine and the byproducts within their blood system as well.
So contrary to popular belief, e-cigarettes do carry some potential risk from secondhand exposure. But e-cigarettes are vapor, so companies market them as having no secondhand smoke. Let's see what other marketing strategies e-cigarette companies use to sell their products.
I've seen e-cigarettes in convenience stores or anywhere that you would normally buy regular cigarettes.
The colors are fun, there's different flavors, doesn't feel like you're smoking cigarettes. The prices make them sound cheaper than buying like a pack of cigarettes.
Most of my friends, they are mostly just smoking e-cigarettes. They aren't really into cigarettes.
E-cigarettes are marketed to young, tech-savvy people, and the marketing is working. E-cigarette use is on the rise for high school and middle school students.
In fact, new research shows that 7% of high school students who have used e-cigarettes have never even smoked a traditional cigarette.
They are produced in many different colors and with many different flavorings as well. Bubblegum and cherry and cola. And these are very, very attractive to adolescents.
Because e-cigarettes are not a tobacco product, the Federal Drug Administration cannot regulate the manufacturing, sale, or advertising of e-cigarettes under tobacco laws.
No offensive odor, and they only produce vapor, so I can enjoy them wherever.
E-cigarette companies can also advertise their products on television, something that tobacco companies are not allowed to do.
And with little regulation on sales to minors, kids have access to a potential lifelong addiction.
State legislatures are aware of these risks and the legal loophole that e-cigarettes fall in. Some states have already passed regulations on the sale of e-cigarettes to minors, while others are working to pass laws of their own.
The tobacco industry is a science, and they continue to study the most effective way to deliver nicotine to the body, because if they can deliver nicotine effectively, they can much more rapidly get you addicted to the cigarette. There's also good evidence to suggest that an e-cigarette will be the first introduction to nicotine in a teenager, and then they will move on to using tobacco products.
I'm Molly, and I am an e-cigarette smoker. I was smoking traditional cigarettes for about 3 years before I came across e-cigarettes. It was definitely a peer pressure, friend socializing type of activity for me. It was actually in the city where I realized that someone was smoking inside, and I was like, you can't do that. Like, you're in New York City, you're not allowed to smoke inside. What is he doing? And that's when my friend turned to me and said, no, I think this is this new thing that's coming out. It's called an e-cigarette. And so we're like, well, we gotta do it now. We went straight towards the hookah pen because it said less tobacco, sounded harmless. Once I was introduced to e-cigarettes, we started realizing that, one, it was a little bit easier to get away with and a lot better for you. At least we thought so. For me, I saw e-cigarettes as a way to quit smoking traditional cigarettes. It definitely then grew on me much more than cigarettes. I, would go out and buy an e-cigarette right now. I would not go out and buy a pack of cigarettes. The side effects of an e-cigarette are definitely similar to the side effects of a real cigarette. You can still get nauseous and sick from smoking too much of it. There are definitely times when you are smoking too much or don't realize how much you've been intaking and your throat will burn the next day. I was definitely naive when I started smoking e-cigarettes. I didn't take the time to look anything up. I read the box and figured, well, it had to be true. I definitely see e-cigarettes as a new kind of addiction. They are becoming just as integral in people's lives as traditional cigarettes, so you can't deny that people are getting addicted to them.
I think it's really false advertising. It says no nicotine, but then in the back it says there's nicotine.
Kids will get into the habit of smoking something and then want to smoke something stronger when they can.
E-cigarettes with nicotine, then cigarettes with nicotine, and then you have a real problem with addiction.
Nicotine is an addictive stimulant. A stimulant is a class of drugs that increase your body's metabolism and heart rate. Users typically feel more alert after using a stimulant. Nicotine is unusual though. Some users report that it creates a feeling of relaxation or calmness.
We know that nicotine is a highly addictive substance. It's the reason why people smoke cigarettes, use other tobacco products, and why they use e-cigarettes too.
The first few hits that you take are going to have the highest concentration of nicotine, and as you smoke it or inhale on it, vape it more, the concentration of nicotine is going to go down, and you're going to be sort of driven to start the next one because you want that hit, you want that feeling that you get from the nicotine inhalation. The other concerning element is that we know that nicotine has a detrimental effect on the developing brain. When mothers who are pregnant smoke, they can cause significant cognitive damage to their unborn infant, and when that child grows and develops, there's good data to suggest that the nicotine has caused developmental delays. In the adolescent brain as well, that's still developing, the nicotine can affect certain areas of the brain that will affect judgment, that can affect the likelihood for addiction later on in life to other substances, including drugs and alcohol, making it much more likely that a child or an adolescent who's been exposed to nicotine in their teen years will be using tobacco products, will be using alcohol and other drugs when they're older. Nicotine is as addictive as cocaine and heroin and tremendously difficult to come off and withdraw from. And when you don't get the nicotine, you go through a very uncomfortable process of withdrawal. Agitation, anxiety, palpitations, headaches, sometimes nausea, loss of appetite. It can be very, very uncomfortable.